At this exact moment, your body is doing something that no machine on earth could ever do. It's emitting coherent light. And so I say this not metaphorically or spiritually, literally. It's measurable biophotonic light that actually is emitting from your DNA. And it's being used to coordinate cellular communication faster than any nerve signal and more precise than any pharmaceutical ever designed. Your heart is generating an electromagnetic field that extends several feet actually outside of your physical body and is actively entraining the nervous system of the people around you towards your emotional state. And this is whether you are aware of it or not. Your cells are responding to a frequency, to intention, to the energetic environment that you exist in. And I say this because a lot of people just think it's like the food you eat and the pills that you take, but the field you inhabit and the field you generate have a very intense and physical effect on those around you. And the research on all of this, it's existed for decades. So if that's the case, why does nobody know about it? Because the model we built medicine on, the body is a machine, symptoms are serving as malfunctions, and drugs as replacement parts. And that can't explain it all, okay? And the model not only can't explain it all, it actually ignores the biophotonic light that's coming from your DNA. Because if you acknowledge that the body is this quantum field, the entire pharmaceutical approach to disease stops making sense at the most primary of framework, because it's saying matter only affects matter. And if we start to incorporate the field, we start to incorporate what we know about quantum physics into biology, it changes the way that the cells behave. It changes the way that the biology behaves. And that's hard because that's a $1.48 trillion industry that is not interested in having its framework disrupted. I'm Dr. Shalane Carter, and this is Be the Frequency. Today, we're going to actually blow the machine model wide open. Welcome back, or if this is maybe your first episode, just like welcome in general. I'm really excited to have you here, and this is genuinely, I think, one of the best episodes to start with if you're just finding us, because everything that I talk about on this podcast episode rests on what we're actually building today. So many other episodes take information from what will be covered in this particular episode. So this is things like homeopathy, energy medicine, nervous system work, spinal energetic, biophoton therapy, all of these different machines that are working in the frequency field, because this episode talks about the body's capacity to actually heal itself without drugs and without surgical intervention. So this is really more about like why frequency matters, why your emotional state actually affects your immune system, why even the practitioner state affects the client's outcome. It is imperative for me when I meet with somebody that I tend to my own frequency, I tend to my own field. This is why the remedies that I use in my practice work in ways that conventional biochemistry cannot fully account for. All of it, every single thread actually comes back to this one foundational question. And this is kind of what got me into school in the first place, is that what is the human body actually? Because when I think about it, and I have some friends and a client that opened up a stem cell facility. And we were talking a lot about how stem cells, because stem cells have the genetic coding to be able to create anything in the body. How do stem cells know what they need to be? How do they know how they need to replicate? Because then there would have to be information, right? The information in what's built is different for a liver, is different for an eye, is different than a bone, is different than a muscle, is different than a tendon, is different. You know what I mean? So all of these cells have a different cellular makeup, but all of the coding for what is created comes from the DNA. But how does it know what it needs to become when it needs to come during gestation? How does it know when to differentiate into different things? We talked about this a lot, and this is the whole reason why I was like, I want to do an entire episode about this, is because it's not just the genes. It's not just the biochemical transactions that are happening in your body. The answer that you've probably been given for your entire life is that the body is a very sophisticated machine and it kind of, has all these different systems. And that answer is not necessarily wrong. Okay. It's just catastrophically incomplete. And the part that kind of got left out is the part that I'm talking about when I talk about stem cells and differentiating. That's the part that actually changes everything. Okay. So what we're going to do today is I want to help complete the picture and how this applies to you, to your health, and honestly, you could apply this really to anything in your life. We're going to start with where the machine model came from, why it has dominated medicine for 400 years at this point, and exactly where it starts to break down. And I want to actually then go in and kind of build more of the quantum field model of what your body actually is at the biophysical level, including biophoton research, electromagnetic field research, and the quantum biology findings that are focusing a lot more on scientific establishment to kind of revise essentially everything that it thought it. And again, that's part of science. When people are like, well, the science, and I was like, okay, it irritates me sometimes. Mostly because science is questions. It's questioning what you already know. It's questioning what's put in front of you. So science, by and large, is not fact. It's what you know to be true up to this point while still questioning what's in front of you. It's being fucking curious, okay? So this really means that if we're going to talk about this and put it into practice, it means we need to recognize this is like how you heal yourself. This is how you work with other people if you're a practitioner. This is how you talk about your work, how you build your practice. This is grounded. I wanted this to be able to ground you in the most current and most accurate science that's available right now, while still being open to change. Years ago, the thought that you could change your gene expression was like ludicrous. Now we understand not only one, that it is very true. There's a whole study for it. There's whole parts of universities dedicated to looking at epigenetics and the way that genes express and how they're changed based on environment. You would have told somebody that in 1970s, they would have been like, you know what I mean? So we need to understand though where the model actually comes from and why it fails. So the machine model of the body actually has a birthday, I don't know if you knew this, but it was born in 1637 by a French philosopher. René Descartes is really most credited for this. And you probably recognize it from the phrase, like, I think, therefore I am. But what Descartes also gave us and what the machine model has never fully recovered from is the idea that mind and body are completely separate. They are very distinct substances, and the mind is a non-physical, like, apparatus, so to speak, and the body is a physical, which means that the physical meaning more mechanical. And that kind of puts us in that reference of, like, again, more like a car and less like something that is adaptive to its environment. In Descartes' framework, because the body is a machine, because it has these parts, it has literally just inputs and outputs. And it's understood by taking things apart and examining each component separately. The heart is a pump. The lungs are, these like bellows. The nerves are more of like hydraulic tubes. Okay. The whole thing kind of operates on this mechanical principles, and it can be, the most important part is it needed to be able to be mapped, to be measured, and eventually be able to be fixed when it's broken, right? That's how we look at a car. We need to be able to see where things go and be able to replace them when they're not functioning optimally. And I mean, this, honestly, if you think about the time, it really wasn't that crazy for the 17th century. It was actually pretty revolutionary because for so long they were working on cadavers and things like that. They didn't want to disturb their dead. It was more of a religious practice, things like that. So it was really just observation, cause and effect. They weren't really kind of going through any of those things. To look at it more of this way, like internally, that like basically all your organs have certain functions and we just need to make sure it's got the right parts and the right things. It was pretty revolutionary for the time instead of just observing like outside. of the body. But for certain applications, again, like anatomy, surgery, trauma, right? It was a framework that really allowed the modern medicine model to be able to develop kind of the extraordinary capabilities it has, because Western medicine is wonderful acute medicine. And I'm not really dismissing that. And when you need to hear that your appendix, needs to be removed, you want a surgeon to say this mechanically, okay, not metaphorically. When you're in a car accident, you want emergency medicine, and that's like full stop right there. Like, but Descartes' mechanical framework got married to like Isaac Newton's mechanical physics, and the universe as clockwork, like billiard balls that are like bouncing off each other in this predictable linear chain of events of cause and effect. And altogether, they basically, that when that happens and when those two have been paired like that, they build this like philosophical foundation of modern medicine. And that foundation honestly has fundamentally shifted in 400 years. And some of the issue with where we're sitting at right now in medicine is that not only does it take a long time for research to now prove something to be true and accepted by science, but then once it's proved and accepted, it takes about 50 years for education to change. So we are always about, in our education that we teach in accredited universities, about 50 years behind the current research. So when people are like, well, they went to medical school, I'm like, great. They are getting the same knowledge as somebody that went to medical school in 1990, in 1985, in 1980, went to medical school at that time. Like, they are getting some of the same education as people who are retired. And that's where I have a really hard time with the slow moving and slow acceptance in the Western medical model. And I want to say this because I want it to land, and I want you to understand the framework behind most of what happens in most of the conventional medical appointments, the approach to disease, the logic behind pharmaceutical interventions. That basic ontology of what health and illness are is rooted in a physics model that was replaced by quantum physics over 100 years ago. So think about it this way. Again, Newtonian model we have known has not been true for quite some time. Now that we know more, we need to do better. We know more about quantum physics, so we're being asked to upgrade our view of the medical model. It's part of the reason that I created You Are the Medicine membership. A lot of ancient medical models integrated energetics and that vital life force and these unseen things that were not physical into the way that they practiced. And so I was like, we also need to educate on these things. We need to inform people, okay? So quantum mechanics has been our best and most thoroughly tested model of physical reality since the earliest 20th century. Okay. We use this to build semiconductors, lasers, MRIs, GPS satellites. You guys, this is not fringe science. Okay. It is some of the most confirmed scientific framework in human history. Okay. And it says that at a fundamental level, reality does not work like the billiard balls that just, again, cause and effect. It says that there is a field of possibilities. It says that particles actually exist in multiple states until observed. Until there is intention, possibility is what exists. It says that measurement, aka observation, changes what is actually observed, that you actually have an influence on your reality. So also things like particles that have interacted remain entangled, quantum entanglement, right, across any distance. And they influence each other instantaneously, which is wild for a lot of people to grasp. But quantum entanglement basically says anything that has ever interacted will continue to respond instantaneously, no matter how far apart they are. And because our universe is constantly expanding, things have already entangled and interacted. So we do have the effect on people. It's why distant and virtual healings and some of that work that I do works really well. It's because we are a part of quantum entanglement, because we're utilizing that principle. It also says things like energy and matter are interchangeable, which is a hard concept for, again, most of us have been taught in the Newtonian physics model. I mean, I have. That's what I grew up learning. And when you start to take that concept of energy and matter, that it can be both, like, that really starts to rock your world in the way that you view not just your world, but your body. Okay. E equals mc squared, and that equation itself actually has implications that we have not even barely begun to even apply to biology. Like, our science is so behind adding this into and looking through health and looking through biology through a quantum lens. And this is why I want to have a lot of these conversations so that you're prepped and ready. The world is changing. Okay. So let's talk about then what happens when you actually apply quantum physics to more like living systems, again, like you and I. This is that field of quantum biology. And it's young. It's new. Okay. As a formal discipline, it's not that old, which it's like, there's this video. I can't remember what this was in reference to. I was watching it on some kind of training, and they were talking about building community specifically. But you're looking at this man who's at a festival and he's kind of dancing by himself, and he's dancing wild. He's all over the place. And then all of a sudden, like, another guy thinks it's funny and he joins in. And then like people around them are like, okay, well, that's fun. And before you know it, everybody is like bum rushing this like one man, now group, to participate. Everybody was sitting on the lawn. Okay, it's like an outdoor music festival. Everybody was sitting. Now people are swarming in that direction to be a part of the movement. And if you're listening to this, if you're following my teachings, if you're in the membership, we're talking about these things, then you might be the one or two people that are dancing on your own in that field, because this is not new. But as far as in the application of it to society, to health, it is very, even at 20 or 30 years old. And so you might be the weirdo for a little while that talks about health in a different way. I know I am. I've been talking about it this way for years. And finally, I would say the past, like, especially after 2020, I'm starting to have a lot more conversations with people that are like, oh yeah. So like, it's coming, and it's okay to be a little bit different. It's really kind of restructuring medical education from the ground up. And that's, again, why I created the membership. There's a need for it. I see it. I see it in the way that we operate. It's no longer, like, it doesn't work. It's never really worked fully, but it's gotten us by. And because it's acute medicine, it felt miraculous. But we've been using acute medicine as lifestyle medicine. It doesn't work like that. But I do want to first be honest kind of about the medical model that's more like that machine Newtonian conventional medicine, because I think a part of what makes it sticky is that it does some things really well. We've just placed it in the wrong category. It's meant to be acute. It's not meant to be lifestyle. Like, it's meant for trauma, surgery, infections. I would even say, I don't know, I want to say certain type of cancers, but I'm kind of even on the fence about that. I'm going to go down a whole rabbit hole on that one. But these are kind of the area where the machine medical models approach, isolate the problem, target it, intervene mechanically or chemically. That it worked really well. Modern medicine is really extraordinary there. And I'm not anti-medicine. I'm not anti-Western medicine. I am anti-pretending that one model is the complete picture, because it's clearly not. So because the machine model completely fails to explain things like spontaneous remissions, like, you can't tell me when they're like, I don't know what happened. Their scan 3 weeks ago, they had cancer and now they don't. Things just clearing up out of the blue. Like, this is what happens more often, I would say, in oncology than most people are comfortable in admitting, just after, again, reading a lot of research, talking to a lot of people and peers. The machine model doesn't have a framework for this. They can't explain it. And so they always like chalk it up to the placebo effect, which in some trials, I would say it's some, like, the percentage is something like 57 or 59%. Like, it performs that well. And so sometimes it actually outperforms active drugs by like a huge margin. And so if the body was purely a machine, belief would not stop biology. But it does over and over again. Okay? This is kind of the measurable impact of intention, of prayer, of distant healing on biological outcomes. I believe it's Anderson Cancer Research Foundation. I can't remember. Anderson, something to that effect. Anyway, they just are publishing they recently published a study actually on the effects of like energy healing on cancer itself. And I think it was specifically liver, and had phenomenal results. So like there is so much that we just don't understand or can't explain when we try to compact everything down into this model of like cause and effect. Okay. I actually talked about this. I can't remember which episode, but it was published in the Annals of Internal Medicine, if I'm remembering right. But identical twins, okay, so they had identical DNA, and they follow them and talk about them developing different diseases at different times. So to me, when you look at that and you look at if the machine model is the complete model, identical parts, identical DNA should produce identical outcomes. And the fact that your thoughts, your cognitive, emotional activity can change gene expression literally within minutes, like this to me confirms, and I shouldn't say to me, but it's actually been confirmed in studies on like mindfulness meditation and stress response, that those things matter just as much as what you eat, just as much as what you put on your skin. The machine model says that the body and the mind are separate. Biology is actually saying they aren't. So why are we not listening? Or why haven't we listened? And why are we not listening now? And kind of where do we go from here? Okay. And I think from here, this is where we go into quantum biology. I think from here, this is where we start with what your body actually is. So like, I want to give you, I think you need to understand this in order to understand biology in a quantum physics perspective, okay? In like 60 seconds, because I want you to have a framework before we apply it to the actual body, okay? If you aren't, I could geek out on like quantum physics for a long time, so I want to make sure it's applicable to you, but at the subatomic level, okay, the level of electrons, photons, atoms, reality behaves in ways that actually violate Newtonian intuition. They violate the way that Newtonian physics explain things. Particles exist in superposition, so multiple states simultaneously, until the act of observation collapses them into a single state. Okay, it's now commonly taught. It was not taught when I was taught growing up about atoms. It was taught that electrons followed a path. Now we understand it's more like a cloud, that they're there, but we're not sure where they are because they've yet to be witnessed. So they just exist in possibility. Another thing, particles that have interacted remain entangled. Okay, this is really important. So when you change the state of one, its partner responds instantaneously, regardless of distance between them. I always love this particular quantum principle because originally Einstein actually called it spooky action at a distance, and spent years trying to basically disprove this. And I always just thought that was funny, that I was like, the most scientific thing that Einstein could come up with is spooky action at a distance. Okay, cool, got it. But experiments have confirmed that it's real. And now it's called, again, quantum entanglement. But energy and matter are not separate categories. They are interchangeable forms. And that's something that you have to shift in your mind when you think about biology, okay? The vacuum even of space is not empty. So space is not actually space, if that makes sense. It's a field of potential energy. There's possible charge. And the observer is not separate from being observed. So the act of measurement is actually part of the phenomenon that's actually being measured, which I think is just really cool. And I say these things, I'm not saying them as like metaphors. Like, these all have been experimentally confirmed repeatedly for over a century now. A century, you guys. Okay, so now at this point, for decades, scientists have actually assumed that these quantum effects only operated at the subatomic level, right? That warm, wet, complex, like biological systems were just essentially too noisy, too large for any of that like quantum phenomenon to actually continue. So biology was still like labeled as Newtonian. And then as we started, again, biologists got curious, and the subsect of biology that now produces quantum biologists, they're like, hey, let's like peek around in here and see what's going on. So what's happening? There's a lot more going on here. All right, one of those. So photosynthesis is one of those things that they were looking into. And that's if I would hope you're familiar at this point, but that's the process through which plants utilize sunlight into chemical energy. So this turns out to be what's called quantum coherence. This is not a classical like energy transfer, right? Energy moves from one molecule to the next like that, like in that ball, right? Thing, losing its efficiency at each step, right? Its momentum. Quantum coherence, where energy exists in superimposition across multiple pathways at the same time, it basically finds the most efficient route with near perfect fidelity, which I think is just crazy. Like, we couldn't make a solar panel that's that efficient. Plants have been doing this for billions of years using quantum mechanics, and they're like, bro, catch up. Another one is enzyme reactions actually in your body use quantum tunneling, which, again, I'm like, let's nerd out. This is basically where particles pass through energy barriers they classically should not be able to cross. I think of this more like time traveling, okay? They basically they walk through the wall, okay? This is how many of your most fundamental biochemical reactions happen actually fast enough to sustain life. Without quantum tunneling, your metabolism does not work. Like, even when you think about how it's not just my digestive juices break down things. It's the enzymes being able to move where they need to move, basically just like hop the fence. That your body is doing that all the time, and you think that you can just replace a part and it'll work fine. And it'll work exactly like it's supposed to. To me, that sounds, now that I say those things out loud, when doctors say those things, I'm like, that kind of sounds silly. Even like birds use quantum effects and proteins in their eyes to help them navigate. Like these cryptochrome proteins, okay, that are sensitive to the Earth's magnetic field via quantum entanglement between electron pairs. Okay. They are effectively using quantum phenomenon to orient themselves in time and space. That's probably one of the most studied things, was they're like, how do they know, like migration patterns, how do they know how to go? And we're seeing like some of those studies even creep up in aquatic animals like whales and things like that migrate to have babies and then migrate back. In like all of these examples, like life is not just compatible with quantum mechanics. Life actually depends on quantum mechanics. And it's been used all along, whether you accept it or not. We just didn't have the instruments that were advanced enough to really see it. Okay. Then what does this actually mean for your body? Your body is not really this, again, collection of these separate organ systems that just happen to coexist together inside skin container inside your meat suit. Like, that's why when people are like, well, just take that out. No, I'm not against getting things removed if they're, again, surgery, if, it's genuinely needed. But if it's emergency, great. If you have time to try and lifestyle, medicine it up and kind of get it back to working how it should be working, why don't you take that route? Why don't you encourage the body's healing response to mount up a response and change things in your body before just chopping off organs? People are like, we don't need the appendix. We're actually finding out we do need the appendix. Okay. That's because your body is this unified, dynamic, self-organizing field of energy and information. Every single cell is under constant communication. This is not just via chemistry, not just via nerve signals, but via these electromagnetic fields, biophotons, acoustic vibrations, and quantum coherent effects. This is why the stem cells know how to differentiate by different electromagnetic fields that inform it. Okay, and this is not speculations at all. It is what the instruments that we now have are showing. And when you understand that the body is a field of possibility rather than a machine, the entire logic of health and disease completely changes. Okay. One of my professors, and I really enjoy his work, his name is Bruce Lipton. He's a cell biologist, and he's also the author of The Biology of Belief. And I reference his work quite a bit because I think the findings in a lot of his research really started to restructure cell biology, but has been pretty largely ignored by mainstream medicine, again, because it didn't fit their medical model. The finding is that the brain of the cell is not in the nucleus. It is the membrane. Okay? The membrane is a liquid crystal semiconductor. It is a structure that reads signals from the environment and translates them into changes in the cell's internal activity. This includes changes in your gene expression. This is why this is important. The signal, the signal it reads, the membrane, are not just chemical. They're actually electromagnetic. The voltage and the charge will change the cell membrane. Okay? This includes, again, not only the voltage, but it includes frequency, it includes vibration. And I think the one that changes everything for the way that we're looking about it is your emotional and energetic field of the organism the cell is a part of. So when you put the cell in a soup, in a body, in a terrain that is full of hate, that is full of malice, that is full of criticism, it responds very differently than the same exact cell that is put in a terrain that is full of love, compassion, kindness. Your cells are literally listening. Your terrain is essentially the story of your life that they're listening to the emotional frequency that you're operating from, to the energetic environment that you inhabit all the time. They are changing their gene expression accordingly in real time all day long. This is not, again, I'm saying this because this is not mysticism. This is not woo-woo. This is research that was shown in a lab. The observer effect applied to the body, the consciousness of the organism, it's not separate from the biology of the organism. They're one system. We talk about this a lot in the membership. You cannot separate these things. So you have to start to look at your symptoms differently. In the quantum field model itself, it really makes complete. In the machine model, though, it's impossible because, again, everything is separate. So let's talk about then, if we understand the Newtonian conventional model, and we understand the quantum biology, quantum physics model of health, I want to actually spend a little bit of time on biophoton research because that's what we talked about in the beginning. Because this is the piece that I find that's probably most extraordinary and the piece that most directly applies to energy medicine. So Fritz-Albert Popp was a German biophysicist, okay? He spent over 40 years from the 70s up to around the 2000s studying something that most of his contemporaries thought was basically a waste of time. Like, all the people that he worked with were like, what are you doing with your life? And he was actually studying the light that was emitted by living organisms. He found and replicated so many dozens of independent studies from laboratories like worldwide. This is what he found, okay? All living organisms actually emit coherent light from their DNA. It's ultra weak, but it is measurable. And it's not just any light, it's coherent light. It's more organized, more laser-like, so to speak. It's not incoherent like a light bulb. You know how a light bulb spreads? The light spreads wide and scatters. And laser beam's a lot more focused. That's the type of light that's emitted from DNA. And this distinction really matters because incoherent light like sunlight or like a light bulb, they consist of photons traveling in all directions, many different frequencies, completely unsynchronized. So it illuminates, but it does not carry well-organized information because of the different frequencies and because it's scattered. I talk a lot about full spectrum light and how it's really beneficial to the body. But again, the light frequencies that are coming into your eyes, the different frequencies, the body knows how to utilize these different frequencies. But when we're talking about the light that's emitted by DNA, coherent light that is more like a laser consists of photons that are traveling in the same direction at the same frequency in that perfect synchrony. So it carries vast amount of information with a lot of precision. And this is more how like fiber optic networks work. It's how barcode scanners work. It's how surgeons actually use lasers to make precise cuts. So your healthy cells emit coherent light like this, okay? And what Popp actually found about disease is that cells under stress or in states of illness or kind of in the process of becoming cancerous emit incoherent light, chaotic light. So coherence starts to actually break down before your biochemical markers of disease are really detectable. This is happening before you even notice any changes in your body. This disruption of the biophotonic field is the earliest sign of illness, and it precedes symptoms. It precedes blood work changes, lab work. It precedes a diagnosis, a lump. So for medicine, if we were to take this more seriously, it would, to me, be pretty revolutionary. You could potentially detect the energetic signature of disease before it actually physically manifests. Like, how cool would that be? And because not only that, you could actually intervene at the field level, restoring biophotonic coherence before disease roots itself in and establishes materially. This would change, it would make pharmaceuticals pretty much obsolete, to be honest. Like this, and this like seems like science fiction, like, oh, just change the way that the cells are emitting light, just change the coherence. But like, he spent decades documenting this. And it's what integrative energy medicine practitioners have been doing intuitively, without a language for it, for literally centuries. Because here's kind of what more of the biophoton research actually tells us about energy medicine. If the body communicates via light, okay, if you are a light body, as so many people say, if cellular coordination is photonic as well as chemical, because it is both, then working at the energetic or frequency level is not bypassing the body's communication system. It's actually working directly with it. Because the physical manifestation is the last place. We're working with the communication system that starts the whole process if you were to work on the light body. So what I do in energy healing sessions, I'm not making something up. I'm working at the biophotonic level. It's why tending to my field is so important. When I do spinal energetic sessions, same thing. We are changing the communication within the system. When homeopathic remedies resonate with the body and initiate a healing response, it is working at the level of the field. Okay? Because we've talked about homeopathic remedies, right? They're diluted. They're not full potency of whatever it is. Okay, whatever the substance is that's in there. The higher the number on the little tube or the tincture, the higher the dilution, which a lot of these just carry an energetic signature. You can, the material itself can no longer be measured. So when your nervous system, okay, regulation changes the way that your body feels, the way that your immune system functions. This changes the way that your digestion works. When you change this at the field level, it expresses differently through biochemistry. Okay, this is a shift that happens. Energy comes first, and then matter follows. This is not some kind of like, again, I want to reiterate, this is not like a spiritual claim. This is a biophysical one. This is getting beyond the materialistic level. Research, actually, as he got older, I think is some of his like best work, but it suggested something that was like pretty like monumental. It suggested that the biophotonic field of the body may be involved in consciousness itself, which is where I was like, wild that like coherent light is actually part of how awareness is organized and expressed in a living system. So we talk about being light beings. We are literally light beings. And it's, again, not a metaphor. This is actually a description of you at the most basic biological level. Now that we've kind of like prefaced all of these things and we understand the field a little bit deeper, I kind of want to talk about the elephant in the room for every homeopath, every person who has ever been helped with homeopathy and had someone tell them like it's impossible because there's nothing in it, right? We just talked about this, that it's not measurable at some dilutions at all. I think I want to bring it up and I want to call it out because this is an objection that's really common. And it really starts to reveal exactly how completely the machine model has colonized the way that we think about medicine. It's completely taken it over. In a homeopathic preparation, the substance is diluted and successed meaning like it's shaken really vigorously, repeatedly. Okay. High potency preparations go way beyond the Avogadro number, which is the dilution threshold at which like no molecule of the substance remains. Okay. So in a 30C preparation, which is pretty like, it's a pretty standard potency, like the likelihood of a single molecule of the original substance being present is essentially zero. And when you think about that from the machine model perspective, like from the biochemistry only perspective, this means that there's nothing there. There's nothing that can help you. And therefore, it can't do anything. Therefore, anyone who has ever been helped by this experience is just a placebo effect. End of conversation. But we talked about the placebo effect. Okay? When you talk about the quantum field perspective, this conclusion is not just premature, and I would say immature as well. It's also based on the fundamental misunderstanding of what the preparation contains. This, to me, is why some of this, I use homeopathic medicine all of the time. I love herbal medicine. I love frequency medicine. But as far as like, again, changing different frequencies, different things, I love homeopathy for a lot of reasons because what remains in an ultra high dilution in a homeopathic preparation is not the physical molecule, it's information. Most of my work is helping the body reorganize or integrate information, no matter where what tools we're using. Okay. We're changing the blueprint. We're changing the signature, the electromagnetic imprint of the original substance in homeopathy stored in hydrogen bond network of the water. Because water is a quantum information system. We see Dr. Emoto's work in water and how, speaking over water and things like that changes the way that the water crystallizes. Like, there's so many different examples of this. I'm like, who do we want to talk about first? I have a couple of notes here. There's two, Emilio I'm going to butcher his last name. Emilio del Giudice, and Giuliano Preparata. It's Italian. Obviously not. I'm not Italian, but they were two Italian quantum physicists working in the 80s and 90s, and they demonstrated through the quantum field theory that water molecules do not exist as independent, randomly moving particles. Okay, so they start to organize into more coherent domains, clusters of molecules that behave as more of a single quantum unit, responding together to electromagnetic signals, and they're capable of storing electromagnetic information. And again, the Dr. Emoto's work with the water is showing us that as well. So these coherent domains are the physical mechanism by which water retains the energetic signature, right? You're not separating one from the other. When it maintains this energetic signature of a substance after the substance has been removed. So the water itself is not empty. It's holding and carrying information. It's imprinted. Whenever I say imprinted, I always think of Twilight. If you know, you know. But when you imprint on something, it holds informational frequency of what it's been in contact with. What does that also sound like? Right? I'm waiting. I paused like I was waiting for you to answer, but quantum entanglement. Right? It's come in contact with it. It's now responding in a similar fashion. This is the physics that homeopaths have essentially been describing for 200 years without having the language of the quantum field theory to explain it. And then there was Montagnier. So he won I believe it was the Nobel Prize in physiology in 2008 for his discovery of HIV. Okay. He's not really a fringe figure. So what I found interesting is that he discovered HIV, and he was honestly a very decorated virologist in modern science. But in 2010, he actually published research showing that DNA emits electromagnetic signals. They were specific, they were detectable, and they were reproducible. And that water can actually pick up the signals of DNA that's dissolved into it. So the interesting part is that after the DNA was filtered out of the solution until no DNA molecules were detectable, right? So it's like straining the DNA out of there. The electromagnetic signal persisted in the water. The water itself held the signature of the DNA. And when he published this, the scientific community was like, this is impossible. Essentially, it was this unpunishable crime. They're like, you're crazy. And honestly, his whole reputation completely changed after that. And he's like, just look at the data. This is the mechanism that homeopaths have been using for 200 years. Okay. And it's now documented by a Nobel laureate in a peer-reviewed publication. Water retains and transmits electromagnetic information of substances that it interacts with. And this is why water is, I think, one of those essential things to life is it changes how we interact with it. Changes us and we change it. It's a way in which we have influence over our biology because we are filled with so much water. There's nothing in it is not really a scientific statement anymore. That's a statement made from somebody who doesn't understand a more advanced model. And they just can't see what's there. Well, we know now so much that there's a lot that we can't see, that it doesn't mean that it doesn't exist, right? There's one more piece that I want to talk about. It's one of my favorite in kind of this world of understanding this next wave of medicine and all of the things that are in and are taught and are the foundations of you are the medicine. And the homeopathic law of similars. So this is that like cures like. So it's saying that a substance that in a healthy person produces symptoms, in a sick person, that same will produce a cure. Right. So when it's homeopathically, because again, the energetic signature, in quantum terms, this is the resonant principle. Okay. Homeopathic remedies carry the frequency signature of a particular pattern of whatever you use. When that signature resonates with the corresponding patterns of the body's field, the disease pattern, the symptom pattern, it creates resonance. And in resonance, the body's own self-correcting intelligence, that healing response, is amplified into action. It's telling the body, hey, there's something going on. Okay. It's trying to be like, hey, this is how we correct ourselves. The remedy itself doesn't actually do the healing. It's actually transmitting a signal to the body. The body is the medicine. The remedy is the signal. Okay. So this is why I carry a lot of homeopathic remedies in my home. It's why I am constantly using my Does Bio dispensary. That's what's offered to everybody in the membership, because this is professional grade, practitioner formulated. In fact, one of my colleagues formulated a couple of them for Does Bio. Literally precision, frequency preparations designed to transmit specific signals to specific biological patterns. So this is not an alternative to acute medicine, to Western medicine. This is medicine that's at the level of the field, the level at which a lot of issues start with. So when we talk about how does this apply to me, because I don't want this to just be a podcast that you intellectualize and like listen to and like log off. I want this to be it changes how you work. If you're a practitioner, it changes how you talk about your work. It changes how you approach your health. It changes how you understand what's happening in a room when you're visiting any type of practitioner, whether it's a Western or more of an Eastern or natural-minded practitioner. Because if the body is a field rather than a machine, the entire logic of treatment starts to change. So instead of trying to replace broken pieces, right, or extract things that just aren't working, you want to actually start looking at how do I restore coherence to my field that has lost it. You stop using language like fighting the disease and you start using language like amplifying your healing response, amplifying your body's intelligence. You're not overriding your body's processes with pharmaceutical force. You're starting to work with the body's quantum nature, meeting the field with the right signals at the right resonance at the right moment, okay? That reframe alone. In the machine model, the symptom is essentially malfunction. Something's broken, something's gone wrong, something needs to be corrected or suppressed. In the quantum field model, your symptom is communication. It's the body's coherent attempt to signal disruption in the field. Hey, something's going on. It's incredibly intelligent. It's wise. It's purposeful. It's the body doing exactly what it's designed to do to get your attention and guide you towards something that needs to return to coherence. Suppressing a symptom without actually addressing the field that disrupted it in the first place, because again, that's where it starts. Like, that doesn't actually resolve your problem. It silences the messenger while allowing this underlying disruption to continue. And in a lot of cases, it actually drives disruption like deeper into the field where eventually it kind of reemerges somewhere else. So there's this piece too that I think a lot of practitioners have never really been explicitly taught because, again, it's not happening in a lot of institutions, but it changes how you show up to your work. That your own field is part of the medicine. I've referenced this before. I tend to my field regularly because when you're in a room with a client or you're in a healing session or whatever, you are not separate from the treatment that you're offering. There are so many times when people say just being around you makes me feel better. Yeah, because I tend to my field. My biophotonic coherence, the quality of the organization of my field is high. So it makes other people's fields notice the change and start to change themselves. This is not like a new age philosophy. This is actually backed by a lot of information from the Heart Math Institute. Okay. I think too, the shift and the change of practitioners who can articulate quantum biology behind their work when they're operating in an almost completely untested market. Like, most energy medicine and holistic health practitioners are either not talking about the science at all, or they're relying purely on like testimonials, on intuition, or they're using a lot of spiritual language. Like, the spiritual language never really resonated with me. And it's part of the reason why I talk the way I do and I research what I do, and I'm interested in all of these other things, because not that I don't believe that this is spiritual work, but sometimes that doesn't build the trust. This using quantum biology gives you framework. It's not to replace spiritual language, but it's to stand beside it. It's understanding that, again, that science and spirit are the same, just like body and mind. You can't separate one from the other. And I think the practitioner who can speak to both, this is the practitioner who like has a lot more accuracy, has a lot more authority, has the positioning, or will have the positioning that a lot of people are looking for. And you need to own it completely. Here's what I think, if you leave with anything from this episode that I would like you to leave with, that the model that told you that your body is a machine, that your symptoms were malfunctions, that drugs were kind of more like replacement parts, that what cannot be measured or in a test tube or in a lab does not exist. We know a lot of people with chronic conditions are like, that is 100% not true. That it's just not the whole truth. It's a useful tool, and it's, again, finding its place in a hierarchy. But that's a narrow range of problems that got mistaken for the entire picture. So the complete picture is this, that you are a coherent, luminous, self-organizing quantum field. Okay. Your cells are emitting light right now. It's organized, it's coherent, and it's really information rich of biophotonic light. Your heart even is generating this electromagnetic field that changes the room when you enter it. Your body is always responding to frequency, to the remedies you take, to the intentions that you have, to your energetic environment, to the regulation state of any practitioner that you're seeing, or if you are the practitioner, any client that you're seeing. It's not mysticism. This is literally biophysics. And the moment that you stop treating your body like a machine that needs to be fixed and start actually working with the intelligent, self-healing, frequency responsive quantum field, it actually is, I think your whole life will start to change. Your health starts to change. Your perspective on life starts to change. This is the way that you practice. For practitioners, this is the way that it starts to change the way that you explain your work. This is the way that people understand what's happening to them. It's going to start to completely shift. The results you get, those are everything. The people that have faith in you, trust in you, that you trust your own body. This is not fringe medicine. You're practicing the medicine that quantum physics is proving at the subatomic level, and it's time to own that completely, okay? I'm so glad you're here for these conversations. I'm glad that you show up for these things. I'm glad that you're interested in like what, again, not just what you've been taught, but starting to continue to open your mind to what else is possible out there and keeping that curiosity open. So until next time, cheers.